summer night, it's 80 degrees at night, but they're walking around with a face mask on and a hoodie with the hood up. Like, why are you walking around that way? That gives you a behavior that it's not right, right? You see that people walking around when it's 80, 90 degrees and they're wearing gloves. Why are you wearing gloves? It's 90 degrees. Why are you wearing the stocking cap, the hood up, and things like that? So we can put all the information with on top of the behaviors to build that reasonable suspicion, to make contact with people and see what they're up to and who they are. This one gets a little hard sometimes. Illinois' first Wardlow. So this is unprovoked flight. So when coupled with other factors such as the presence of the police in a high crime area, can constitute reasonable suspicion to justifying a search and or seizure, at least in the absence of circumstances that suggest that flight is motivated by a non-criminal purpose. So what this means is if I'm just driving by and somebody sees me and they just take off running. So it's not against the law to just simply run from a police officer that's in the area. If they're in a high crime area at 3 a.m. and that he sees me and runs, that gives me a little bit more of that absence of circumstances that maybe he is committing a crime and now I can contact him or detain him to figure out. But where you see this sometimes is you make a traffic stop and a backseat passenger gets out and runs. Well, he's not the one that's detained, the driver's detained because he's the driver of the car. So it's happened in the past, not here, but across the United States where officers have gotten in trouble because what we call it is you chase the rabbit, right? He jumps out of the car for a reason and then you chase him and now the car drives away or there was something in that car that they didn't want you to find, so they run. So it's not against the law for that backseat passenger to run from us, and it's on us to know how to articulate that and what to do with it. Another way for us to conduct searches is plain view. So a police officer lawfully present at a scene or at a place may seize without a warrant an object of incriminating nature if it's in plain view of the officer. An article is in plain view if the police officer observes the object from a lawful vantage point. So if I'm conducting a traffic stop, I see foil with burn residue or a narcotics pipe in the dashboard, on the console, that's in plain view. So now that allows me to seize it. And then I could seize the vehicle and do a warrant and search the vehicle further for other things. If a police officer has a lawful right of physical access to the object, its nature as contraband, fruit, instrumentality, or evidence of a crime is immediately apparent upon observation. So if I can see that it was used in a crime, I can seize it without having to get a warrant or anything like that. Plain view doctrine also builds probable cause. So if I see that object in a vehicle, I now have probable cause to search the whole car. I don't need a warrant, I can do it. Some judicial districts would rather you stop and get a warrant, but there's case law that says that I don't have to get a warrant if I have the probable cause right then and there to conduct a search.
And you can do the trunk and everything?
Mm-hmm. Okay. If I establish the probable cause, then I can search anywhere in the vehicle. So search incident to arrest. So that means if I place somebody in custody, I can search their person without a warrant. I can go into the pockets. If they have a backpack on them, I can search the backpack, their purse, anything that's on them. I can search it at the time of arrest. Areas that may be searched, regardless of whether or not an arresting officer suspects weapons, evidence, or dangerous persons, will be discovered. Contemporaneous with a custodial arrest, an officer may conduct a warrantless search of the arrestee area within the arrestee's immediate control, arrests within a home or other structure, or arrests on the road. So an area within the arrestee's immediate control. So if I'm talking to you in a car, you have a warrant, or it's a DUI, I can search within immediate reach of that driver's seat. So I can search the glove box, the center console, under the seat to see if they stashed any contraband, anything like that. If you're in a home, you're talking to somebody on a couch, and you build a probable cause to take them into custody, you can search the couch cushion, anywhere that's in immediate control that they might have stashed contraband or a weapon or anything with that nature. Anything outside of that area, then you would still need your warrant or other probable cause to do that. The stop and frisk searches, or the Terry, that's more you have to articulate if they're armed or possibly armed, have a weapon. What that means is you can tell what certain things are. I mean, obviously a gun's pretty identifiable. A pocket knife, other things like that. If you've been an officer a while, you're conducting a Terry search, you know what a crack pipe feels like. You know what certain things that are illegal feel like in pockets, brass knuckles, things like that. So when it comes to a stop and frisk, if you don't feel any of those things, you can't go inside pockets, you can't do that stuff. However, if you're conducting a Terry frisk and you can immediately identify without further manipulation, so you can't like pull the pocket out, you can't feel it, that type of stuff. But if you immediately can grab it and say, oh, that's a crack pipe, then you can get it. Like if I were to search a pocket and I feel something and I can immediately tell that it's a magazine for a weapon, I can take it. I can go in the pocket and search. It's not something. A lot of the stuff that's hard is drugs sometimes, especially like powders or things like that. You're not going to feel that with a quick search, so you can't do that. So you have to. It's all about articulation. Your training and experiences plays deep into that. But stop and frisk extends out to automobiles as well. So you may search the passenger compartment of an automobile, limited to those areas in which a weapon may be found. If the officer reasonably believes that the suspect is dangerous and may gain immediate control of a weapon. So you have somebody on a traffic stop, you turn your lights on, you notice that they're digging under the seat, they're reaching, they're bending over. You can ask them to step out of the car. You see that a lot in all the online videos, right? When an officer asks somebody to step out of a car, well, I don't have to. Well, you do. You have to. I don't need any really reason to tell you to step out of a car. If I want to talk to you outside of your car on a traffic stop, you have to step out of your car. It's not a choice. So if you see that, you ask them to step out. You can do a quick search under the seat to make sure there's not a weapon. If there's not, then you can have them sit back in the car. But there's a belief out there that if an officer asks you to step out of your car, you don't have to. Well, you do.
And if they still don't, then what happens?
Then it can turn into obstruction, and they can end up going to jail over it. Because you'll see audits or other things where you get sovereign citizens who consider driving a right and not a privilege. So you pull people over that will refuse to give you their ID because they tell you that they're traveling. And unfortunately for them, traveling in the state of Colorado in a vehicle requires you to have a license. So there's many other ways to travel: bicycle, foot, horse, all those things. But if you choose to use a vehicle, you have to identify, have a license, have insurance on your car, all of those things. And that's where you see a lot of that is when you deal with sovereign citizens that don't want to produce identification. They won't roll their window down on the traffic stop. They won't exit their car, and it turns into there's Title 42 has a statute where you have to provide your driver's license upon request to a peace officer when you're suspected of a traffic violation. So they're misdemeanors or low-level traffic offenses, but obstruction is about the highest that you can charge for that.
So what if it's a passenger, or can you even question a passenger?
You could question them, but to get a passenger to identify themselves, you have to have the reasonable suspicion. So I can't force a passenger to identify themselves in the car.
Step out?
Or you can have them step out. Anybody in a motor vehicle during a traffic stop, upon request, has to exit a vehicle, but they don't have to identify themselves unless I have reasonable suspicion. One of the things we run into that is if you're clearing a driver and they have a protection order, so say it's a female driver and they're protected from a male party about the same age, they give you the descriptions, and there's a male passenger. Now I have reasonable suspicion to make him identify himself that he's not the person who's restrained from her. And those are the things where you can make them identify themselves, but just being a passenger, they're not the person that's detained unless you can articulate that they were coming out of
What
it.
if they're traveling?
The passenger?
Do they have to provide a driver's license?
No, a passenger in a car doesn't have to identify themselves unless you have reasonable suspicion that they're the ones committing a crime. The driver does, because they have to have one to operate a motor vehicle in the state of Colorado or any other state. So other exigent circumstances where we can enter a home or a vehicle without a warrant, only for a felony. They got rid of it to where we can't do it for misdemeanors anymore. Hot pursuit of a fleeing felon, so means I'm chasing them on foot and they run in the front door of a residence. I can just chase them in after them. I don't need a warrant. Imminent destruction of evidence. If it's a drug violation and they're running in the house to try and flush it, I can go in without a warrant so they don't destroy it. The need to prevent a felon's escape. I don't need a warrant. Risk of harm to the police or others. So if there's an imminent threat to death or serious injury to somebody, I can do it. An example would be you get called to a domestic at a residence, you walk up to the door, it's locked, you hear somebody screaming for help, and you can kick the door in and go in and make sure that somebody's not being harmed. Welsh versus Wisconsin just is what we talked about. It doesn't allow warrantless entry of the defendant's address involving minor offenses. So this one was for a DUI. They forced their way into a home to try and get a blood sample for evidence of a DUI. But the court said, no, you can't do that. So they also may be needed to respond to other emergency situation. So if somebody's having a medical emergency, you can see them on the floor, nobody's home, they can't answer the door. The fire department, if there's a fire, they don't need a warrant, they can kick open your door to put the fire out. The state of Colorado just passed a new House bill, and it took effect July 1st. In the state of Colorado, law enforcement can no longer serve any warrant on a dwelling, so occupied residence, after 7 p.m. So we can't serve a warrant after 7 p.m. unless we can articulate to the district attorney and to a judge why it has to happen after 7 and between 7 a.m. So I don't know why they thought they needed to put a time stamp on it. A lot of it has to do with all the things over the last 2 years with no-knock warrants. The biggest one in Louisville, where an officer was killed or shot, and then a lady was killed during a no-knock warrant. Colorado, 99.9% of the time doesn't allow no-knock warrants anyways. So as to why they decided to tell us we can't serve a warrant after 7 p.m. is a little confusing to us. It also creates other problems, right? Because now it lets the criminal have the advantage of 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. If you have something in the house, you have time to get rid of it. And did you take it the same way that exigent circumstances doesn't apply?
Yeah.
So destruction of evidence doesn't apply to getting an exception to the 7 p.m. So you're there to serve a warrant, they can flush their dope all night long down the toilet until 7 in the morning, which creates a burden on police departments, because now if there really is something in there, you have to have a police officer, more than one police officer, sit there from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. to make sure nobody leaves, nobody goes in, nothing comes out. So it's going to create a pretty big financial burden and other issues. So inventory searches, now we don't really call them searches because they're not supposed to be a search. It's just supposed to be an inventory. So if I have a reason to tow a vehicle, say it was in an accident, there's no insurance, not a licensed driver or anything like that, and I'm towing it for safekeeping, I can do, if it's a routine and it's in policy, so if we have a policy, which we do, that says we need to inventory items of value, so we don't get accused of stealing it, so we know what's in the car. If something, when it goes to the tow yard and it gets broken into or something like that, there's a record of it. We can't use an inventory to gain an advantage. So if I have that gut feeling that something's in there, I can't say, oh, well, I'm going to tow your car and do an inventory, and then now in the inventory I find your dope. I can't do that. It's unethical, and it would get tossed out in court because I didn't have a real legitimate reason to do it. I'm using it as a workaround, you would say, to try to get that evidence. So it has to be routine, you have to have it in policy, and you have to do it every time the same way. Questions?
So if you have a warrant and you knock on the door and tell the people that you have a warrant, then, and they won't let you in, then what?
Then I can knock their door down.
Then you can.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you have to announce, and you have to give them a reasonable amount of time to answer the door. So in here, say this was a house. If I'm knocking on that door, it shouldn't take them very long to get to the door. After we scream and yell, police, search warrant, come to the door, bang on the door. Now if it's a 7,000 square foot house, a 2-story house, you have to give more time because they might be upstairs, they might be in a basement. You have to give a reasonable amount of time for them to respond to open the door before you can kick it or damage property to get in. So it all depends. The only time you can serve a no-knock warrant in the state of Colorado is if there's an immediate, you can prove it, and there's an immediate risk to the police, like they're armed with a gun behind the door or in the house, those type of things you can, but you have to be very articulate in your report on how you know that and to get the no-knock permission from a judge. So every warrant in the state of Colorado is a knock warrant.
So like if you're doing a big drug bust at a house,
Mm-hmm.
where, like, CBI is there, the cars and the dogs and
Mhm.
everything. So you have to knock and they have to let you in?
No, I just have to knock, and if I can articulate that, as soon as I knock and say police, they're gonna start destroying drugs. I can bang on the door, say police, wait, and hit it and go, because I have training and experience that says you're gonna raid a drug location and there's people inside. As soon as they know the police are there, they're gonna destroy evidence. So I don't have to wait as long for them to come and open the door. You just have to announce that, one, you're the police, they know it's the police coming in, and that you're there. Because they don't want you to destroy people's property, they'd rather them come to the door. 99% of the time at drug houses, they're not gonna come to the door. They're gonna run to the toilet and flush stuff. So they want that. You want to get in there as fast as you can.
what happens if somebody is selling drugs and they haven't paid for their inventory yet, but the police come and say they're here and they flush it, what happens to them because when they can't pay for it?
Probably bad things. I would say that if they're working with the cartels and things like that, they want their money, so they'll get it one way or another.
So it's not always in their best interest to flush it.
It's not in their best interest to get caught, to be honest. It's not really a win-win for some of the people that are who they're working with and what they're doing. I'm trying to find the exact one that tells us we can have people come out of the car, because I know that would be a question that there's quite a few of them. But yeah, so there's a lot of things to take into consideration when people get too hooked on CSI and shows on TV and they think that stuff just happens, right? You see on CSI they go and they get a fingerprint and put it in the computer and it prints out right then and there, and DNA, you swab somebody, they go put it in there and it's right there. You get drugs tested. I had a case that was from May and I just barely got the results back from CBI now, so that it doesn't take a snap of the finger. DNA can take a year. I'm sure Sergeant Avila and I'm not sure who does the other one, but in the crime scene class, you'll probably get more in depth with it. But there are certain crimes now that CBI won't even take evidence for. If it's a property crime, they won't take DNA for a property crime. They'll only, because they're so backlogged, they'll only take DNA on person crimes. So it's hard on certain things. It's a lot harder to lift fingerprints and do those type of things. It's not as easy as they make it on TV. A lot of things come into play. You use too much powder, you can run a print anymore. Because of CSI, everybody's wearing gloves anyway, so it's hard to get fingerprints, especially in areas where a lot of people are. So if someone were to break into your home, I could take fingerprints, but then now I'm gonna have to fingerprint everybody that lives in the house to send with it to say exclude them, these are people that live there. And so it's not an easy process. It's not a snap of the finger and it's done and we get the results the next day. It takes a long time, and I know people get frustrated, but it really is a process. TV's ruined it because they put this perception that things happen at a snap of a finger, and we just go back to the office, put it in there, and it's there. We go back to the office, submit it, they take it to CBI, and then it's there until they get to it, because they're processing evidence for the whole state that doesn't have I think Colorado Springs, Grand Junction, Denver, Pueblo have their own crime labs. And so everybody else in the state uses either the Pueblo office of CBI, the Grand Junction office, or the metro area. So there's a lot of stuff, and they have to prioritize it. Persons, crimes, homicides go first, and then as we go down, they'll get to it. So if you get good fingerprints, they can get through fingerprints pretty quick. If you lift a good one and find them. So that's on our side, but DNA, it's a waiting game on DNA, just because of how much backlog there is across the state. And when DNA became usable in the forensic field, everybody used it, right? You have a burglary, you're swabbing everything, so DNA, and so now it's backlogged, and I know they've had to hire people in the last couple of years just to come in to get caught up on sexual assaults, just to process sexual assaults, as they've had to hire extra people, and so those are the priority, because state law, you have to have a SANE exam to CBI within 21 days of your evidence, and it has to be there. That's if the victim consents to having it tested. But we have time stipulations and they have time stipulations, so a lot of the sexual assaults and homicides get pushed to the front.